Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I am so thrilled today to have Scott Edwards. This is going to be a really fun conversation. Scott, you have the Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network, among other things. I'm ready to be entertained by you.
Well, I'll have a little juggling. We'll do some dancing. And we'll get things going. Hey, I'm here with Annika Jackson on Your Brand Amplified podcast. I feel so honored. You have got such an amazing podcast, such a great variety of guests. I was listening to a few of your shows. You had James Hipkin, I think. He was talking about the importance of digital stuff, way over my head. And Rieger, I think it was, talking about being an entrepreneur, which is right up my alley. But I got to tell you, the most exciting, Bond, James Bond.
Yes, I know,
you got
right?
him to talk about brain glue and all the stuff he does. And just to be able to say his name would be a reason to put him on my podcast.
Exactly. And then, yes, there's James Bond 007, but then also Bond and glue. There's so many jokes, so many yucks in there.
Exactly. And he was a great guest. Obviously, his book has done really well, and he brings a good message to your audience. And let's hope we do the same thing today so we can talk branding, entrepreneurship, comedy, whatever you want. It's your show.
Let's do it all, Scott. So talk about your start in entrepreneurship. Did you start as a comedian? Did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur? What was your journey like? Take us back to the beginning.
Let's make it clear right off the bat. I'm using the video aspect of this. I am not a comic.
Okay.
I was smart enough to become the producer of comedy, and I was on stage every night for over 20 years. And some people think I have a gift of gab and can be funny, but I'm not a comic. Those are left to the professionals. But to bring the story to you and your audience, I started my first business when I was 17. And it was out of necessity. I came from a poor family. I was working since I was 14 or 15. And I was actually the night maintenance janitor for a sleazy motel. And I was hiding out from the boss in the bar, and I overheard two guys talking about making money on the weekends, striping lines in parking lots. And I go, hell, I could do that. I had no money. So I had a friend that had just came into a huge inheritance of $500. And we took that money and we bought a paint machine. We're like, okay. And we came up with the name of the company and some business cards. And I was going to be the salesman. And then together we're going to paint the lines. And we realized, how are we going to get the paint machine and the paint to the jobs? Oh, luckily we had another high school buddy that had a van.
Oh my gosh.
So the three of us formed our first company at age 17 called A&A Restripe. And I'm proud to say that the guy that owned the van, Paul, still runs that company today, 40, 50 years later. Actually, his kids run it now, but that company is still operating.
Oh, I love stories like
California. But I was only in it for the first couple of years and then I got out. But it was a great experience. And the short story that's kind of fun for your audience is, why did I start my own business?
Right.
Because I got fired from every other job.
Okay.
I didn't play well with others. I always thought I could do it better myself. So why not do it myself?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the many journeys to entrepreneurship. Necessity. We don't necessarily fit into all the boxes that you need to fit into for a corporate gig. We want to solve problems with our ideas. Yeah, but that's definitely a big one. I have had that same little bit of a journey of going and working for somebody and realizing, oh, this really isn't for me because I want to do 5 million things. I want to do this, this, and this. I don't just want to be pigeonholed into one job my whole life.
Right. And I wasn't the kind of guy. First off, I didn't have the money, but I wasn't going to make it into college. And I was never a good student. But even as a 9-year-old and 10-year-old, I had paper routes and mowed lawns and did whatever I could to help the family financially. And starting my own company was really me just having that faith in myself to jump in with both feet. And that kind of repeated itself. I've had over a dozen companies I've started and all very different, but it was just to keep my own self-interested in my life and bring a variety. My next company was a portable music production company. We did weddings and bar mitzvahs and school events. But the most exciting was in 1980, before you were born. I opened my first comedy club, and it was actually really early in the comedy entertainment world.
Oh.
It was the 12th full-time comedy club in the entire U.S.
Oh my gosh.
in 1980, and it's still operating today. So now it's one of the oldest clubs in the country.
Amazing.
Called Laughs Unlimited. And that kind of speaks itself to your topic. You know, your brand amplified. And one of the things I learned early on was how important it was that whatever business I was starting, to brand it a certain way. Now, for the younger listeners to your podcast, my first company, A&A Restripe, why did we call it that, Annika? You know.
Well, A is the first letter in the alphabet. So when people are companies,
bing, 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 bing.
but you didn't choose AAA. So why A&A?
We just went with A&A. But back in those days, that was so you had a good listing in the phone book.
Right.
What's a phone book?
Well, so I'm going to tell you that one of my first jobs was cold calling people from the white pages to get their carpets cleaned. I grew up in Kansas, and this was Topeka, Kansas, and it was one of the only jobs I could get as a high school freshman. And if you were successful in convincing somebody that they needed to go get their carpet cleaned at their house, then we got to throw a dart at a dartboard to figure out what bonus we would get. So, yeah.
Well, such was payment back in those days, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a crapshoot. Well, the reason I mentioned that was that in the early days, you know, you used what marketing you had available to you. And back then it was the yellow pages or the white pages. Later on, it was radio, TV, and newspaper. And that's all kind of faded. In today's business world, it's social media and influencers and having a good website. And as James Hipkin mentioned, having good digital exposure. Right. And branding, though, it's all about branding. To give you an idea, my comedy club, Laughs Unlimited, our motto was laugh if you've been there. And we had it on bumper stickers and beer mugs and pins, and laugh if you've been there. Of course, laugh with Laughs Unlimited. In fact, when we answered the phone, we never said Laughs Unlimited. It was just laughs. And that kind of branding, you know, worked. And I ran that company for 21 years to much success.
Fantastic. So you saw, alluding to the marketing landscape change from being in the yellow pages, having your business there, to being able to advertise, to then having to change and figure out, okay, now how the heck do we get all this on digital and use that to make sure that our business continues?
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm old, but I remember when the internet started.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't start it, though. I won't keep that claim like some politicians. But no, it really has been a changing landscape. And it's interesting, Annika, because even when I run a business today, I like some of the old school marketing programs because they still work. They're not used as often by young people, but I still will put out flyers. I still use business cards. I found a way to run television ads for about $1 for 30 seconds.
Wow.
So I run TV ads still. Yeah, it's a limited market. It's different, but you still reach people. And that is the whole point of branding.
Right.
In fact, I once had a barbecue food restaurant. It comes in the name too, branding. I called it Sticky Fingers.
Oh, yeah.
Great name for a barbecue joint, right? So those kinds of things have an impact on your entrepreneurial success. Using the name or the marketing or your branding to build your audience and let the customer base understand really what you're selling. I mean, if your restaurant named Sticky Fingers, you have some idea what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Comedy club called Laughs or Laugh If You've Been There. My last adventure, I owned an insurance brokerage. Yes, I know, very exciting, for the last 15 years. But I monikered myself. I branded myself as Scott, the insurance pro. And I pushed that for 15 years to the point where when I showed up my Rotary Club or my bank, it was like Norm from Cheers. People would yell out, "It's Scott, the insurance pro," because they thought it was funny.
Yeah, but it stuck with them. Talk about brain glue. Every single company that you've talked about so far, you use those techniques.
Yes, it's so important to brand yourself. It is true that if you do something that not only explains what you're offering to your clients, whether it's a service or a product, Ann Rieger was saying about her product, it's about getting it out there, having the name explain what it is. You don't want to make it too complicated for the audience. And what I found in all my various companies, and I've had, like I said, quite a few, it is about messaging and branding. And I'm just a big proponent of that. And I think that's one of the reasons your podcast is so helpful to people and so important, is that branding yourself, whether you are doing it as an individual or as a company or as a corporation, is really key to success.
Well, to that point, what do you want people to feel? What do you want people to think when they hear your brand, right? And that's brain glue. And that's exactly what you've used in each one of your companies and each one of your brands. Just saying the word laugh, you have to smile, right? So answering the phone, laughs, of course, everybody's going to smile and be happy. I mean, not to mention, when you think about going to a comedy club, what do? You're going for entertainment, for lightheartedness, for community, right?
Yeah, right. It's funny because a lot of people don't see what's right in front of them. And you wouldn't want to have a comedy club and answer the phone, the awful place. It wouldn't make sense. Now, I was very lucky. I got into comedy in 1980. I got a chance to work with Gary Shandling, Robin Williams, Dana Carvey, Paula Poundstone. They all work for me. Many of them got their start at my club. Bob Saget, Dave Coulier from Full House. All these people were just starting when I was just starting in the comedy business, and we kind of came up through the ranks together. They became rich and famous, and I became an insurance agent.
Are you sure that you shouldn't be on stage doing comedy?
No. It was a lot of hard work. When you're an entrepreneur, don't kid yourself. You're married to your business. It's a lot of hard work. You have to be focused on your product, your service. You would think, a comedy club, but that sells itself. Well, no, not really. People need to have that experience. My job as the marketer was to get them in the door. Then I had to change hats and become the producer and make sure that the show was entertaining and memorable and made them want to come back. And then I had to change hats again. You're a restaurateur and a bartender when you own a club. So I had to make sure the drinks were priced right and made right and the food. So there's so many different things that come into the work behind the brand. We're kind of talking about the importance of the name or a moniker like Scott the Insurance Pro. But if you don't back that up, right? Like Scott, the Insurance Pro, I was voted the #1 insurance broker in my little town. I like being a big fish in a small town for 3 years. So I validated the name.
Right.
Now, if I was Scott, the Insurance Pro, and then I gave really crappy customer service and didn't help people and I wasn't available, it would have never have worked. So it is a 2-part program. You can't just have a really witty name or a good brand and then not back it up. Annika, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, 100%. If you don't give the whole experience. And the other thing that you're mentioning is it's a lot easier to retain your current client base than it is to get new customers, because that you have to spend a lot more money marketing and targeting newer customers. So if you can provide the right level of service, providing a great service at a great price, making people feel comfortable, they can trust you. Yeah, that's gold
building that trust. I think you hit an important word there, that whether you're selling comedy, drinks, insurance, I had a travel agency for a while. I even owned a submarine.
What? Wait a minute.
For a few years.
Submarine. Okay, talk about that.
Well, my point was you have to back up what your business is only going to succeed if you bring the customer service. And I was just trying to bring it all together and say, whether I was painting lines in a parking lot or playing music for a wedding, doing a comedy show or selling insurance and all the other stuff in the middle, owning restaurants and art galleries, it was all about the customer service. So that to me is the key to branding. Is that you have to have the customer service to go along with that branding. They kind of work together. You could be a great customer service person, but if nobody hears about it through your branding and marketing, what's the point? And like I said, you could have a great brand and great marketing, but if you suck at customer service and have bad products or don't take care of your customers, doesn't matter how good your logo is. I mean, I think Bud Light, I don't know when you're going to launch this, but Bud Light learned that recently, is that they promoted this market, this brand for the last 50 years, and they literally killed that brand almost overnight. And it's sad, but shows the importance of knowing your audience, understanding your audience. The submarine, you want to hear about that?
There's so many stories I want to hear from you, but talk about the submarine. Yeah.
Yeah. The short version of the submarine, it was a huge financial disaster. I lost my ass.
Okay. So this is good to know, because what I've heard so far is how many of your businesses that you've started are still in business or have had long legs. Most businesses don't last 10, 15, 20 plus years.
Yeah. And I've been very blessed that way. But it is true that every entrepreneur has its failures. And Emmett Stone said, failures are the stepping stones to success. If you don't try and you don't fail, you won't succeed. Exactly. And one of my adventures was I was a co-owner of a company called Snuba International. It's all over the world. It's underwater snorkeling, very safe, very popular. And the owners of that called me and had me come over to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and help them launch a tourist submarine. And I was doing some of the ballast and some of the final touches on the submarine. And I was thinking, hey, I want one of these. So I got some partners and we built our own, had the same guys build another submarine. But I made a mistake. I wanted it to be closer to home. I didn't want to go to Hawaii all the time. Not that I don't mind it. And I launched it in Monterey, California.
Yeah.
Great tourist area. Yeah. One of the deepest bays in the world. Great sea life. Otters.
Yeah. Great aquarium up there.
Yeah. Kelp forest, everything. So it was the Nautilus 4.
Okay.
And we launched it and it was amazing and looked amazing. The problem is Monterey has cold water and there was a problem with algae bloom. And the tourists couldn't see the sea otters and the sea lions and all the pelagic fish around the kelp forest. So I had to pay a scuba diver to go along with the submarine and keep the windows clean.
Oh my gosh.
So it was very expensive. We lost our butt. We ended up selling the submarine to the Wrigley Gum family, and it's still operating out of Catalina Island in Southern California.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Closer to me.
Yeah, and warmer water without the algae bloom. So they're doing very well with it. But that's my submarine story. I only had it for about 2.5 years. But hey, I owned a submarine. How many people can say that?
Not many. Not many. Yeah, there's a lot more we could say with everything that's going on in the news right now with underwater vessels.
Right.
We will not.
Yeah, no, this was totally safe. Didn't go deep or anything. But it is interesting that as an entrepreneur, I always felt anxious to do my next adventure. So I was very successful with the comedy clubs. I got into it right before the big rock and roll wave of comedy, got to work with some of the best in the business. I mean, it was just a dream come true. But I made a lot of money in the 80s. And so I opened up a restaurant. Then I opened up another restaurant, a jazz club. My mom got me into art. So I had a couple of art galleries and the submarine. I had a beach shack in Hawaii for about 6 years. So I was having fun reaping the benefits of a successful business. And for me, it wasn't about packing it away and saving it, which a lot of people would say was stupid. But my theory in life is you never know when it's going to end. So enjoy it while you go. So, I would charter the Learjet and fly a plane full of women to Las Vegas or LA and, do some fun, crazy things. So I don't have a lot of money, but I've got a lot of great stories.
Yeah. Well, and you have had a history of success. So you know that you can replicate that with whatever you decide to do next. So what are you doing next? What are you doing now?
Well, I actually officially retired about 6 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
And right now, I'm kind of going nuts because I need that next adventure. But I do put my energy into my podcast. I just launched a stand-up comedy podcast network that is a free app on all Apple and Android phones. So Stand-up Comedy Podcast Network. Look for the free app.
We will link to it in the show notes.
Okay, there you go. And there will be another adventure. I just getting older and a little slower jumping into things. But I believe wholeheartedly that when you're an entrepreneur and you're having success, you have to, one, enjoy it, and two, spread the love, spread the wealth. So when my one comedy club did really well, I opened another, and then I opened another. So at one point I had over 125 employees I was helping support. I had 3 different clubs. Then I opened one restaurant, Sticky Fingers, that employed more people. I opened another jazz club restaurant called the Art Art of Pasta,
Ooh.
which was tailored after Carmel, California. And we had a restaurant, a jazz club, and a couple of art galleries all in one location. And all of these adventures provided jobs. A lot of my family and friends worked for me. It was a community that kind of in ourselves, and we all had fun. We all made a living, and it was exciting. But there was lots of failures too. I mean, I ended up selling Sticky Fingers after 5 years, but I sold it and got out okay. Art of Pasta, I was able to sell that. It went on for another 10 years after I sold it. And let's see, the art galleries, those were a failure. I'm trying to, you seemed impressed with failure. So I did both my galleries.
I'm impressed with both, I love art, but that's a really hard game to be in.
Right.
I mean, you have the space, you split the revenue with the artists, but you have to make enough money. But then sometimes artists, I've seen a lot of cases where then artists go behind your back to deal directly with people who you brought it. There's so many things, not to say all of it. I mean, my walls are covered with art. I can tell you the story of every single piece.
Right. They all have a story because they're emotional. See, a lot of people used to go, well, I want to buy this because it's going to be worth money someday. And I go, no, don't buy that.
Right.
If you don't buy something that means something to you, that has an emotional connection, don't buy it. Art is an expression of who we are. Mm-hmm. And both my art galleries failed financially but they ran for many years. Mm-hmm. And it is a very tough business, like the Submarine, even the Beach Shack, even though I had it about 6 years, probably was not considered a financial success, just a lot of fun. But, that's okay.
Yeah.
If you're doing something that provides jobs, makes you happy, and you're taking a shot at something that is a business or an opportunity, as an entrepreneur, I feel jump in with both feet. What's the worst that can happen? I've been bankrupt twice, and it's a horrible thing to go through, and it's expensive and difficult. But you know what? You come out of it. You bounce back. Yeah. You find a way to rebuild and redo it. And branding is so important. The marketing behind all this is really part of that three-legged stool, right? What's going to make it work?
Well,
you bring so much information to your audience.
I wanted to ask you, I do think in this world of where everything's digital, but now I think 2 weeks ago, I joined 2 new social media platforms, right? Threads, which is Instagram offshoot, and then also Spill, which is more for people of color and memes and things like that. So not necessarily promotional per se, but people always try to find ways where Threads, I'm like, it feels like the old days of social media where I can just post whatever I want and I don't have to think about selling. But there are people on there who are like, how can I monetize this? Like, when can it just be fun again? When we go on different platforms now, it seems like we just have to promote ourselves instead of having fun. And with everything that's happening with privacy considerations and third-party cookies going away and all of the other things changing on the digital landscape, you mentioned that you found ways to still make the old school ways of advertising effective. So is it that they resonate with a specific audience demographic, that the people who you were reaching out to for your businesses? I want to hear a little bit more about that, because I think it's important for people to not discount the old ways of doing things. I love it when I get mail from somebody, because how often do we get real mail?
Mail, right.
Yeah.
Well, I think what happens is, Annika, that the old becomes the new again. Like you just referred, that back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was lots of successful businesses. And how did they reach their customer base? It was through the mail or TV or newspaper. Even radio at the time. And a lot of those things have gone away as major marketing venues or vehicles. But what is interesting for me is that using them again catches the public because it's unique. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's new again. So I like email blast. I like snail mail blast, business cards, and going to a Rotary meeting or a chamber mixer. A lot of people go, oh, that's so old. I mean, actually talk to people,
Yeah. And now there's an app for that, right? You have the Blink app and it'll upload your LinkedIn. And I have that, but I love business cards. I love being able to have that memory, because if I put something in my phone, I might forget who you are.
A business card should be an expression. It should be the brand that you're trying to share about yourself and your business. There's so much information you can put on that little card through creative ways of imaging and even font that will make you stand out, or like having a moniker, Scott the Insurance Pro. I had a farmer's agency. There was probably 20 other farmer's agencies in my little town. However, I was the only Scott the Insurance Pro, and it was on my business card. cards. It was on my car. It was on my swag, right? It was everywhere because that's branding. And the old school ways worked back in the day and they work again. There's no reason why they still wouldn't work. This is a little bit of an offshoot, Annika, but bear with me. I also believe, and I'm thinking of doing a video series, funny is funny. So some people turn their nose up because my podcast features people like Jerry Seinfeld and Jay Leno and some of these people that were really top of their game. I mean, those two guys are still traveling, but there's a lot of comics that were top of their game in the 80s and 90s. Well, you know what? The material they did was funny then, and it's still funny now. Funny is funny. So that translates into marketing. If you have a good business card and you used it wisely in the 70s or 80s, it's going to work now in this day and age because less people do it.
Right.
Now, I wouldn't go all the way. Like radio and TV is pretty expensive and you do have a very limited reach. Although TV, I figured out a way to get TV spots for 30 seconds. I did a lot of that.
Yeah, you're going to have to share that. You don't have to share. You can share it with me afterwards.
That'll be a secret conversation. But flyers, for example, I know that sounds tacky, but I would do half sheet flyers talking about my insurance agency or my restaurant or my comedy club. And then I carried it around like business cards. And if I went to the bank, I left a little stack. If I went to the gas station or the grocery store, probably 95% of them got thrown away. But guess what? 5% got picked up, got recognized, and got looked at. Much like a social media post. How many people actually see it and respond to it? You know, you kind of throw it out there. I do think that entrepreneurs today have a better marketing base than I had getting started because the internet. You were talking about how important social media is. And I do think that you should use LinkedIn for business. And Twitter for sharing a single idea. Facebook should be more community and family. And if you're going to use it for business, make it your business community on Facebook. I'm not up on some of the new stuff like Threads, and I never even heard of the other ones. And I'm old. But getting back to the old school stuff, using swag, using flyers, using business cards are all things that worked back in the day because people still saw them and connected to them. There's an emotional connection and they can work today. Now, there are some things that I really do feel have lost their value, and radio was one. You should never buy an ad in the phone book because nobody uses a phone book. No, they're still selling them, but I don't know who would ever see it. There's a few things that have gone away.
Podcasts are the new radio.
Yeah, that's interesting to mention that.
I just did a talk for USC because I teach at USC Annenberg as well, on top of all the other things. But I just did a talk about podcasting because it really is. There's more higher percentage of podcast revenue growth than all of the digital advertising landscape. More people are listening, and the younger generations are moving towards podcasts and away from even streaming.
It's like streaming versus TV, right? Anybody under 30 is getting most of their content through streaming and through apps and through podcasts and that kind of entertainment where they can find the niche of entertainment that matters to them, that touches them emotionally so that they want to go to that over and over and over. That's taking away people from standard television or the movies or something like that. But it is so important to kind of engage in some of the new stuff while you hold on to the old stuff. I know that sounds maybe strange, but I still believe in some of the old marketing. But I've been podcasting for 4 years, 3 of my own podcasts. I produce a podcast for a celebrity, and I feel that podcasting, very niche, but you can reach and find your audience. And that's really what matters. You know, even when you're selling insurance, you want 1,000 people to hear about your insurance company in hopes that 10% or 5% need insurance, or not happy with their service and looking for an option, right? It's a numbers game.
Yeah, definitely. So with all these different businesses, is there a time that you felt overwhelmed?
Oh, every day. No. There was times when I had trouble getting to sleep at night because I was worried about what was going to happen the next day. This is going to sound romantic, but it's part of the excitement of being an entrepreneur. When I was going through the bankruptcies, or I was going through, how am I going to cover payroll tomorrow? There are always situations that can be stressful. And what I found and what I try to share with people is that you have to have faith in yourself yourself. And you have to know that no matter how far down you fall, you can climb back up. Part of that is ego. Part of that is arrogance. Part of that's probably stupidity. But you do have to have that self-awareness to believe that everything that you've gotten was not because it was given to you, although there's people out there like that. But I think that the vast majority of happy, successful people are the ones that build or create something themselves.
And then I want to go back also because you mentioned you didn't go to school. You started your businesses when you were 17. So when you figured out how to do branding, marketing, all these different strategies, customer service, was that all organic? Was it trial and error? Did you study? Like, did you read books in the library or, because before internet, did you find mentors? What were some of the ways that you figured out how to use these strategies to benefit your businesses and yourself?
Well, Annika, I'm so glad you asked that. And I want to make it clear to your audience, I did go to college. Okay. I actually got 3 credits in sex education.
Oh, no. Okay.
No. I think part of it was my father, who was a traveling salesman. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a great dad, to be honest. He was not home much. And when he was home, it wasn't great. But he had the gift of gab. He was a salesman. He traveled all over and everybody was his best friend. That was his attitude. And I think that became part of my DNA, that I could talk to anybody and friendly to everybody and try to be of service to everybody. And that had value. Yeah. The other secret, if it's a secret, listen carefully, is that if you're interested in getting into a business that you think would either be profitable or make you happy, or whatever reason you're choosing that business that you want to get into, I strongly feel there's no reason to recreate the wheel. So in all my businesses, whether it was A&A Restriping or Sticky Fingers Restaurant or my comedy clubs or my insurance agency or my travel agency, all the various things I've done, I always spoke to the people already doing that. Nice. And people like to talk about themselves and their success. So when I opened A&A Restripe, I'm 17 years old. I went to the Yellow Pages and I found the other striping companies in town. And I went in and introduced myself and said, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. How'd you get started? Where do you get your paint? What do you charge? Now, of course, there's always going to be an a-hole that doesn't want to talk. Yeah. And then you just have to be investigative, pick up their price sheet. Today, you can go online and see a lot of this information without even having to talk to somebody. I like talking to people, but I found in most cases, people take pride in what they've done and they want to share. They want to help you get going. Mm-hmm. They don't look at you as competition. I was 17. I wasn't going to knock this huge company. It was called Centerline Striping Company. It's still going today. It's like a 50-year-old company. But I talked to the owner, 50 years ago, and he told me, we get our paint over here and this is how we charge, but we use labor. And then when I went into the restaurant business, I went and talked to restaurant owners. I talked to restaurant managers. I talked to waiters. I talked to customers. I was a customer. Yeah. What worked? What didn't work? When I opened my comedy club, I didn't just open a comedy club. I experienced the Comedy Store down in LA. Mm-hmm. I said, man, we need this entertainment in Sacramento, Northern California. There was nothing like it on the horizon back in 1980. Just to educate your audience, stand-up comedy was regulated to strip clubs and jazz clubs. Wow. Back in the 50s and 60s. It was not considered a mainstream entertainment format like it is today. In 1980, very few people, like I said, there was less than a dozen clubs in the whole country, knew what stand-up comedy as a full show, like going to theater or going to a movie, was like. And when I experienced it, I said, I want to do this. I think it's fun. I think it's important. I think it would be good. So I quit my job. I went bankrupt for the first time and just cleared the decks. Now I was single, which made it easier. Right. And I went back to LA and I went to San Francisco and I went to the comedy clubs. And guess what I did? I talked to the managers. Mm-hmm. I talked to the comics. I talked to the club owners. What works? What doesn't work? And I collected all kinds of information, taking notes, and then I did it my way. So what I try to mentor young business people, I go talk to other people doing what you want to do, take all that information in, and then do it your way.
Yeah, that is some fantastic advice.
Well, it works.
Yeah.
It's really not just, it's not just my crap. I actually made it work.
Yeah. Scott, what is the best way for people to follow you and reach you?
Well, there's many ways. You were very nice to let me talk about my stand-up comedy podcast network, which just launched a free app on all Apple and Android phones, but it makes available 18 different comedy-based podcasts.
Oh, nice.
It also has videos of people like Bob Saget and Gary Shandling and Dana Carvey. It also has a joke of the day. And some great blogs done by comics. So that's fun. But then my podcast is Stand-Up Comedy, Your Host and MC. And that was based on, again, a little bit of branding. Annika, is that's how I was introduced on stage for over 21 years. Ladies and gentlemen, here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Yeah.
So my podcast, Stand-Up Comedy, Your Host and MC, features interviews with professional comics intermixed with actual stand-up comedy sets from over 40 years. Just a whole big match of, you have to like stand-up comedy. Those are 40-minute to 60-minute format. I know that people have short attention spans, so I have another little podcast called Comedy Appetizers.
Okay.
Are regulated to 5 or 6 minutes, just pure comedy, right?
Yeah.
Comedy Appetizers. So all these different podcasts and shows have websites behind them. I market on social media, and knock on wood, in the 4 years I've had over 120,000 downloads, and I feel like they're successful because somebody's listening. And like you said, podcasting is the new radio. And so it not only gives a chance to share my love of stand-up comedy and all the people I got to work with in the industry, because I get to reconnect with them 40 years later. It's really wonderful. And the comedy is amazing. I get to share that with people that want to have a good time and just enjoy a few minutes of entertainment.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing your story. There's so much good information in here for entrepreneurs to really think about. And I already have some people I'm going to be recommending your network and your podcast to.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Oh, no. Yeah. I know some people down here in the entertainment industry who are really into comedy and will just love that and all the history and the stories that you're
Well, it really is a labor of love, but much like your podcast, I also try to have a message and try to share something of value. And thanks so much for what you're doing with your brand Amplified, because the information from all your guests, and you're such a good host and bring out the right questions. It is great information for your listeners, and thanks for all you do.
Well, thank you. That's so sweet of you. Scott, do you have a mantra or a motto or some words of wisdom that you'd like to impart?
Just off the top of my head, just have fun.
Love it.
Right? We're only here for a short time. Might as well enjoy yourself, right?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to the audience for listening to another episode, another great speaker on Your Brand Amplified. We're here with Scott Edwards. I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing story. And until then, have a great day. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.